Peace. This is King Noble Black Supremacy. And with this particular video, I want to talk about Momad Noor and the obscurity of black identity in America. And I got to deal with the Hebrew Israelites on that a little bit to address the obscurity of black identity. And I could deal with the Moors a little bit as well. Now, Momad Noor is the Somalian cop, 2-year rookie that shot the white woman, the Australian white woman in Minneapolis. Unarmed white woman outside in her pajamas, calls the police for help, calls 911 for help, gets shot down in cold blood by a cop that's in the passenger side. He shoots across his partner to shoot her because he heard a sound. Loud noises and sounds that now are believed to be fireworks. So she was killed dead by this cop. Now, people know the controversy. I mean, you shooting a lily white yoga instructor, spiritual journey orientated, so-called conscious white woman that's against gun violence. So we know the whole controversy of the story. But look what they're doing now, though. They're making Momad Noor black. They saying this white woman was shot down by a black cop. Not an immigrant. Not a Somali terrorist. Not a rookie police officer. A black cop. Now, is he African or is he black? Or does it matter? America obscures black identity. Your Hebrew Israelites would say, well, he's not black. He's an African. He's a Somalian. And most of America would agree that he's Somalian and not black. And they would respect his ethnocentric identity. They would respect his tribe and his country that he come from. And he will add to the multicultural melting pot that we call America. Most people will let him just be Somalian until he pissed the white man off. Ends up murdering a white woman on the job. Now he's black all of a sudden. He's not a Somalian anymore. So America will let these different African people be African and maintain their African identity separate from black Americans until they piss the white man off, break the rules, then they just looked at as blacks. So they won't escape being black in America. I don't care what tribe you're under. Whether you're Somalian, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Haitian, Jamaican, whatever tribe you under or country you come from, you're going to be looked at and treated as black in America. For one, white Americans are not that educated, can't always tell the difference. And some of them are so racist that when they see melanin, all they could think is think of racism. That's all they can think is you black, you a nigger. They're not thinking that you're African and you're Somali and trying to find out what tribe, what country you're from. If you look black enough to them, you're going to be black to them. We see that as Tiger Woods. He was able to be Dominican and be non-black when he was in good with the white man. But when he fell on the other side of the law, he was immediately labeled as black, stripped of his ethnocentricity, stripped of his culture and stripped of his nationality immediately. Which shows you the obscurity of race in America that a lot of us give credence to in the conscious community and in the black community. We draw lines among the different nationalities and races, melanated races in America. We have drawn lines that are invisible, that are not real. We have drawn divisions and separations that do not exist in reality. If you look black in this country, you are black. Now, I think globally, there's 4 things that can make you black. And you might want to get your pen and paper. Globally, 4 things you have to focus on. 1, DNA, which is the most important. You have to have the DNA, genotype, phenotype. You have to have that to be black. Bottom line, because black is a political construct, but it also has some genetic essence to it. If you don't have the genetic one, I don't care how black you consider yourself to be, no one will ever look at you as that, unless you have some of the genotype or phenotype. The next you have to have is culture. I mean, you don't have to have it, but the next is culture. Culture is how you grew up, how you were raised. A lot of African people are not considered black by black Americans because they don't have black culture or our cultural experience in this country as far as going through slavery and the resistance and struggles that we've had against white supremacy. So they're not culturally black, but they're melanated. And they have the same phenotype and genotype as a lot of melanated people in America. The next is geography. They may be black, but they just may not be in America. They have the genotype and phenotype, but they're not in America. And this is the crazy thing about geography, because I got to go into that, because this video is about the obscurity of racial identity in America. But it's also the obscurity of the racial identity of the so-called African American or black. So say you are an African American and you move to Ghana, and you move to Nigeria, and you have a child, and that child is now born in Africa, has African culture, speaks the African language, went to school among the Africans, but you are an African American. Is that child that looks like the Africans over there, melanated, got their culture and their language, is that child an African now? Or is that child an African American? Which one? That shows you how obscure racial identity is, even in a global manner. Now, if that child comes back to America, even though it has African American parents, per se, and it comes back to America after it grew up in Africa with the language, the culture, the codes and the customs and the culture, and come back to America, would that child be considered black, or would that child be considered African? Do y'all see the obscurity of racial identity even in a global way? Technically, the child has African American parents, but of course, there's no such thing as an African American bloodline or African American DNA. African American and black is a political idea that was born in our struggle in America against white supremacy. You can't do a DNA test for African American. So if the child goes back to Africa, if the parents go back to Africa and the child is born in Africa and has a culture, custom codes, and language of an African, Is he now an African? Because he has the phenotype and genotype. Is culture the only thing that separates blacks from being Africans? Because in America, we say we separate ourselves from the African communities because they have a different culture than we do. We say, well, they're not black because they didn't grow up like we did. They didn't listen to the rap music we did. They didn't go through the struggles we did. They didn't have the community we have, so we say they're not black. So geography plays a role. I said phenotype, which is the DNA, the culture, how you grew up, geography, where you grew up, and the last one, the agenda. So you can have all of them, but if you lack the agenda, it's useless. If you got the phenotype and genotype, and you grew up in a different geography, and you was raised in a different culture, if you have the agenda of the Black Pan-Africanist struggle, the struggle for black people for freedom and liberation, then you're black. I don't care whether you had a culture. I don't care whether you have the geography. But you have to have at least the genotype. The phenotype could even be questionable. But that's two you have to have, the DNA, and you have to have the agenda. The rest of them are insignificant. You could be a mulatto, where you have very little of the genotype. But if you have the agenda of black people, of the struggle of black people for liberation, then you're irrelevant. Now, if you don't have the genotype, but you got the culture, you got the geography, and you have the agenda, it doesn't matter. You're not black. You can support black people, but you're not black. Some white people grew up in a black neighborhood, grew up around black people, and have black culture in America. But they don't, and they have the agenda of black people because they grew up in a similar situation. They identify with the struggles and problems of black people, but they're still not black because they don't have the DNA. Because the DNA is what connects us to the Africans. The white man will never be able to connect to the Africans. He can have the culture. He can have the geography. He can even have the agenda. But if he don't have a genotype, it doesn't matter. Why am I saying this? Africans come over here and we say, well, they're not black. But in America, it doesn't matter what your culture is, because the ultimate culture that is being practiced and enforced is white supremacy and white domination. So every melanated person over here is under the enforcement and the domination of white supremacy. So I don't care what culture you came over here with, you still gonna have to follow the laws of white supremacy at the end of the day, which give them the same exact culture that it gives me. They don't have any special immunity from any of these laws of this country being imposed on them. So they're gonna end up having the same culture. Because the law, the legality, the political system, the political climate dictates what the culture of the society is going to be. So the culture of us and Africans, Ethiopians, Somalians, is the same in America. So remove culture. Our agenda might be different because they may not identify with us. They may not see themselves as black. Hell, many of us don't see ourselves as black. We see ourselves as African. We see ourselves as Hebrew Israelites. We see ourselves as more. But that doesn't matter because the political climate, the political situation, and the legal system is going to determine how you ultimately look and how you're presented or represented in this country. So they don't have the agenda, but they have the phenotype and the genotype. And they've come over here and they share in the geopolitical situation that black people are in America, just by wanting to come over here and amalgamate and assimilate to this society. So they're black by popular demand too. The only difference between them is their communities may have more resources. They may band together, work together more like the Jews. And they may support each other better and be more proactive on certain issues that affect their tribe or their group. But that ain't gonna completely save them, because white supremacy is bigger. The white man and the white population and the white racist population is bigger than any ethnic group in America. And only when these different ethnic groups or tribes or melanated people from different countries come together can we outnumber the racism and racists within this country. Otherwise, attacks against our tribes and against our groups can bankrupt us. All our money can get ate up in legal fees and class action suits, and we could be completely exploited to no end financially. But the difference between the Somalis and the blacks, the difference between the Haitians and the blacks, the difference between the Nigerians and black Americans is they may have more of a community and have more resources and be more tight-knit and be willing to work together to defend their position in this particular country. But that's only going to take them so far. They're going to have to unify with blacks because their problem is the same. The problem that they're up against in this country is the same problem that we're up against. Racism. The white man doesn't love the Somalians more than he loved the African Americans. He doesn't love the Nigerians more than he loved the African Americans. He doesn't love the Ghanaians more than he loved the African Americans or the Ugandans. He doesn't. And he doesn't always have time to distinguish and work out the differences. And the same laws that oppress us are the same laws that will oppress these different ethnicities. You just had some Ethiopians in Georgia here recently. And they came under fire by CPS, Child Protective Services, because they tried to raise their Ethiopian child by the same standards that child would be raised in Ethiopia. And they were found negligent. And their excuse was not accepted. Their explanation was not accepted. They left the child at home by themselves for long periods of time, allowed the child to wander the streets freely, and they used starvation as a method of disciplining the child. And they said this is widely practiced in Ethiopia. You think the white man gave a fuck about Ethiopian culture? All cultural frameworks are oppressed in America. They don't have no new unique sets of rights. When you come over here in this country, you're under the domination of white supremacy, and you must bleach out your culture completely. And if you don't want to bleach it out, and you don't want to fall suit, you'll come under as much as racism and much as discrimination and as much as resistance as black people in America who ain't been wanting to bend down and bow down to white supremacy since slavery so-called existed. We had troubles conforming and going along with the system. You realize that we ain't been over here negligent and not caring and ignorant and not making nothing out of ourselves. We've been over here fighting against cultural oppression. We've been over here fighting against white domination. And when you come over here in this country with your culture, you either gonna bleach it out or you're gonna be a victim of white domination, which makes you black at the end of the day in America. Which is why this Somali was considered black But y'all say, black ain't a nationality, black is not an identity, black is nothing. Then why would they call him black and not a Somalian? Because it doesn't matter what you think of yourselves. When you're at war, that which is hunting you helps develop the narrative, contributes to the narrative of who and what you are and how you are perceived. That's a fact. And just because certain tribes and ethnicities do not know what time it is, doesn't mean that they're not in the same boat or they're in a different situation. If you come to America under Trump's administration, if you come over here to this white supremacy country, the capital, the head of white supremacy, you are coming under white oppression. And you will feel the brunt of that oppression. It doesn't matter your status. It doesn't matter whether you're a police officer. It doesn't matter whether you're a judge. It doesn't matter whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a school teacher, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a scientist. If you look phenotypically and genotypically black, you will be treated as a nigger. Don't be surprised. And it's only a matter of time before all of these different ethnicities and tribes and countrymen from other countries realize that we are in the same boat. They're still coming over here, sleep, deluded by the so-called American dream. And it takes time for that to set in. For them to realize that this cracker don't give a goddamn about you. And you're black in their eyes. Because when they came over to Africa, they were looking for black people. And they got black people out of Africa. And when you come over here, you look just like the black people that they got out of Africa. You look like the same slaves that they took from Africa. They can't make a distinction. I got them from Africa. Damn, you look like them I got from Africa. You think you look more than a slave in the eyes of the white man? The only difference is a lot of these Africans are quick to sell their soul because they believe in the concept of success in America. They bought into the concept of success and the pursuit of happiness and materialism and consumerism. They've bought into the white man's definition. So they've sold out. But it's only a matter of time before they're confronted with the reality of what this white man is. And that it's not just something wrong with black people not willing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and change their condition and get jobs and become productive and take advantage of what's in front of them. You realize that it's not just that. That you're coming under cultural oppression of white domination. And race soldiers are enforcing these laws and these codes, bullying you, and that you live in a white supremacist police state in America. So it's only a matter of time before these ethnicities realize that, wait a minute, they realize what being black is. And it's not listening to hip hop music. It's not sagging your pants. It's being under the oppression of a certain type of perceiver that writes the narratives and enforce the laws, the codes, and make up the rules and the legislation in this country. They started to realize that black wasn't created in America. The perception of black was created in Africa and imported to America. So black wasn't born here in the streets of the ghettos. It wasn't. It was imported from Africa, where you came from. The perception was authored in Africa by how they perceived us as being lesser than them in their strengths and their capitalistic opportunities and an advantage for them to be able to rule the world and free themselves from Europe. And that perception has not changed. that what you think is a condition and a situation of black Americans is truly the situation of all indigenous and melanated people all around the world. We are just confronted with it most because we're right here in front of the devil. We're right here in the hells and smells of North America. So we get the brunt of it. We experience the worst of it. But it's not just for us. It visited Africa first and cultivated itself and developed itself here. Soon as they got that first Negro off that boat. So the idea of being black is a political creation. It's a political concoction. Socially engineered, maintained, and enforced in this country. It is not a group of people. The people you call black are just as African as you are. But they've been culturally oppressed by the laws, legislations, rules, and regulations to maintain white domination. They lost the knowledge of themselves, so many of them are unclear about their agenda, as Africans who come over here wanting something from America are unclear about what their agenda is. And they say they come over here to help their families and send money back home and build their country, but they come over here and they just as fucking lost as anybody else. They lost in the sauce. So the so-called African is our brother, is the same as us. It's just that we've spent more time under the iron fists of these white supremacist dictators who have culturally oppressed us to the point where there's very little semblance of our culture left. And it did that to us a long time ago. But it's doing that to Africans generations by generations, and Jamaicans generations by generations, and Haitians generations by generations, and Dominicans generations by generations, and Latinos and Hispanics and Chinese and Japanese and all nationalities are getting stripped of their culture and their identity because it is being forced by white domination and United States imperialism, white supremacy, which is the problem that North Korea has with America and China had with America. And the only revolutionary spirit that's left in the East that they have in America, and the problem that the Philippines had with America, and the problem that Vietnam had with America, and the problem that Zimbabwe has with America. I got to go in. So this black identity is maintained and created in America. And if you come to America, you walk into that web. And no matter who you was when you came over here, once you get over here, is laws that's enforced against the melanated people, that is enforced to divide and separate and keep the white man in a particular position and status, will work on you just like it did on black Americans. And you all will be just like us, African Americans, in the same boat. That's a fact. Generationally, while you look upon blacks objectively, you'll soon be in their boat as a people, unless you get among the wise, conscious, and intelligent among us and strategize a future of black supremacy and black liberation and Pan-Africanism, black revolution. Unless you get with the wise and conscious among us and strategize that future, you will become the new African Americans. Mark my word. And you will see how black you really are in this country. I'm seeing, as I'm down here in Georgia, I'm seeing whole Eritrean and Ethiopian communities, and I'm seeing drug addicts that are Ethiopians, and I'm seeing African communities that are drugged out. America will turn you black, will make you live up to that political construct that was manufactured by white supremacy. It will strip the African out of you. This is King Noble Black Supremacy. Join my website, www.kingnobleuncensored.com. Donate and don't hate. hit the like button right now to help me get this video out. Go ahead and hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to my new YouTube page, King Noble Guru. Hit subscribe now so you can get notified, and hit the bell as well so you can get notified when my videos come out. And you can stay on the front line of this black supremacy movement. Also follow me on Instagram at kingnobleuncensored.c.o.m. Black supremacy.